Chaldean bar. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful piece of information.
It is?
You should share it with the second hour.
Yeah.
Who knows how to spell Rabbi Hanasi or Hanaha or whatever his name was? Judah Hanaha.
Be Y-U-D-A-H. Would it be Yehuda? Ha H-A N. I put N-A-S-I. Hanasi.
Okay.
All right. Let's. Okay, I did synchronize browser. Synchronize browsing. Yeah. And why can't I pull? Yes, Ray. I was noticing that also. I'm looking for the whiteboard. It's missing. Okay. In the meantime, we don't absolutely need the whiteboard. I want to begin by sharing something with you that I just learned. It's new to me. I discovered it just a week ago. I just shared it with the our live class here. As some of you know, the hour prior to our hour, we have a live Noahide class here with real life Noahides. They even have a tag on them, so they can prove it. And we were taking a look at some classic models of Noahides throughout history. And in the Bible, in the Torah, the written Torah, we have classic examples, of course, of Noah. And who's of course the real original Noahide is really Adam, and that we know that really the Noahide laws should be called the Adamic laws, and it's really more for a technical reason that they're referred to as Noahides. But we see Jethro is a classic case of a Noahide ben Noach. Is a questionable, it's a whole machloket, really what was his status. It appears that he was a righteous ben Noach. And Eov is another classic case of where the sages state that Eov was not Jewish. And that's an amazing book to study from. One source says that the primary message of Job is for the nations of the world. And in the oral tradition, we also have models of righteous converts and of righteous Noahides. The most famous is a Roman dignitary, a Roman governor by the name of Antoninus. And according to our tradition, this is none other than Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who lived in the 2nd century. And he was a close friend and student, disciple of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, of Judah the Prince, the redactor and editor of the Mishnah, the code and codex of the oral Torah. And they had a secret relationship. They met in secret and they studied together. And I found in a Tosafot, it's one of the commentaries on the Talmud. This is from the 13th century, 13th, 14th century, and they quote a Talmud Yerushalmi. They quote from the Jerusalem Talmud, which is not as well studied and well known. It's just coming out now for the first time in a English edition by Art Scroll. It won't be completed for several years to come. But in any event, the Tosafot quotes from the Jerusalem Talmud a little-known fact about Antoninus and his conversations with Rabbi. And he asked Rabbi if he, as a righteous Gentile, will in fact partake of the Seudat Leviathan, the feast, the banquet of Leviathan. Now what that is a utterly profound concept in teaching that runs through the gamut of all the teachings of the Torah. But whatever, and I'm not going to go into that now, but that concept of this absolute reward that is virtually guaranteed for all Jews as who make up the indivisible body of Adam, Rabbi replied to him, yes, you as a righteous Gentile will also partake of Seudat Leviathan. And I was extremely happy to have discovered this source, although there's other sources that indicate inasmuch, and this is what I have been personally teaching over the years, but to my knowledge this is one of the most explicit authoritative sources that state directly the reward of B'nai Noach in this context is inseparable from that of the reward for the nation of Israel. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay. Are there any remaining questions or observations from last week's class? Then let's continue. We are using as our text Drush Eitz Hada'at, Exposition on the Tree of Knowledge by Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv. And Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv lived from 1841 to 1929, and he's considered to be one of the chief, if not the most outstanding disciple and commentator on the Kabbalah school of the Gaon of Vilna. Now, he's not a direct disciple, but he foremost represents the Kabbalah school of the Gaon of Vilna. For the record, let me mention in passing, there's a lot of confusion about what Kabbalah is and what it isn't. It's important to realize that today, at least for the last 200 years, there are 4 major schools of Kabbalah. So when someone says, I'm learning Kabbalah, or I want to learn Kabbalah, whether this is a Jew or a non-Jew, a religious person or a secular person, the question has to be raised, well, which Kabbalah are you referring to? That's like someone says, I'm a scientist. Or someone can say, I'm a professor. I have a PhD. Well, that can mean 100 different things. Likewise, the word Kabbalah in and of itself doesn't tell you anything. There are 4 major schools of contemporary Kabbalah, and they all flow from the ocean of Rabbi Isaac Luria, lived in the 16th century. And that's what's referred to as Lurianic Kabbalah. He is considered the absolute master. He incorporates, of course, all the earlier Kabbalah. In effect, in many ways, Lurianic Kabbalah, Rabbi Isaac Luria, is a commentary on the Zohar, particularly on parts of the Zohar that were very obscure, very arcane, and until the Ari, there was really no explanation, certainly not on the level of magnification that the Arizal expounded. Out of the Ari, about 200 years ago, 4 schools developed, each one emphasizing a different aspect of the teachings of the Ari. The Ari, the word Ari, as you may know, an Ari in Hebrew is a lion. And the reason he was called the lion is because when his name is written out, the first letters spell the anagram of Aleph Resh Yud, Hey Aleph Resh Yud, Ha-Ari, and it means Ha-Elohi Rabbi Yitzhak, the divine, the saintly Rabbi Isaac, and that those 4 letters spell Ha-Ari, which also in Hebrew means the lion. That's why he's known as the Ari, the lion. And when you hear or you read, you see Arizal, you see a Z-A-L afterwards. That is said, can be said after anyone who's passed away. It simply is the beginning letters of Zichrono Livracha. His memory is a blessing. Just to mention his name, that is a blessing to us. His memory should be for a blessing. That's what Zayin Lamed stands in Hebrew, which is transliterated into English as Z-A-L. Wherever you see that, it could be said about anybody. It can be said about the Baal Shem Tov Zal. It could be said about one's father Zal. So Ari, it's either Ari, the Ari, or the Ari Zal. That's Rabbi Yitzhak Luria. And his Kabbalah, relative to the Kabbalah that preceded him, is like Einsteinian physics relative to Newtonian physics. Out of the Ari, about 200 years ago, the most famous school, perhaps, is that of the Baal Shem Tov. That's called Hasidut, or Hasidus. And that is the risk of oversimplification, that is a therapeutic application of Kabbalah, particularly as influenced by the Arizal. Also around that period, there developed the school of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, known as the Ramchal, who was in Italy. The Baal Shem Tov was in the Ukraine, and the Hasidic movement spread throughout Eastern Europe. And Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto lived in Italy. It did not become an actual movement. The difference with the Hasidic movement, it's been referred to as Kabbalah for the masses. And that's why I refer to it as a therapeutic application of the Kabbalah teachings, which are simply what? What is Kabbalah? It's the inner teachings of the Torah. It's part and parcel of the Torah. And the Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's books are many. He wrote many books in Kabbalah. He's also most well known for a non-Kabbalistic book, one of the greatest books on ethics and morals that's written in the last few hundred years, called Mesilat Yesharim, Path of the Just. Classic book of what's called Musar, ethical character development. And another school that also evolved around the same time is that of Rabbi Shalom Sharabi. And he's abbreviated as the Rashash, Rashashh, Rashash. And the school of Kabbalah that he represents is called Beit El. And that is the Sephardic purist school of the Kabbalah. Most people, even educated scholars in Kabbalah, even secular and even religious, many don't even know about this school. I was fortunate to have studied in 2 Sephardic Kabbalah yeshivot, and there's a whole other world going on there that the Hasidic world is oblivious to, and even the Lithuanian Ashkenazi Kabbalah world knows very little bit about. This has changed a little bit over the last decade or so, but it is the purest school of the Sephardic Kabbalist, known as the Beit El, and the 4th school is that of the Gaon of Vilna. And it is perhaps one of the most arcane and difficult schools of the Kabbalah, and it deals with some concepts that are throughout the whole Torah and throughout the Kabbalah, but they're nowhere developed to the extent that they are in the Kabbalah of the Gaon of Vilna, who's referred to simply as the Gra, G-R-A, stands for Gaon Rabbeinu Eliyahu, the master. Gaon means a genius. Our master, our teacher, Elijah, that was his name, Eliyahu. And some of these concepts are the twin messiahs, the Josephic and Davidic messiahs, the concept of the Nachash to Kedusha, of the sacred serpent energy, the concept of Metatron, concepts of good and evil, dealt with in a way that the other more recent sages do not develop. And the Leshem, as he's referred to, Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv, whom we are reading from, is the major expositor of the Gaon of Vilna, of his school of Kabbalah. So with that little introduction, I just want you to appreciate a little bit of what we are reading from, how unique it is, and how little known this school of the Gaon of Vilna. It's little known, and it's little studied outside of a few inner circles of Kabbalists, Mikubalim, in primarily Israel, primarily in Yerushalayim. So, we began with a problem, and there's no better place to start than with the problem. And the problem was this. This is the kasha. Kasha means a difficulty. And the difficulty is that in one place the Arizal tells us that if a human being has a nefesh ruach chaya, a nefesh ruach neshama, and a chaya, including the 4th level of the soul. We introduced that to you, and we showed you on the whiteboard last week the 5 layers, domains of the soul. And you should know that even though there are these 5 levels, most of us, all we have is a nefesh and a ruach. if we get a neshama, it's only a sliver. And when we would have that level of the neshama, we would be in a state of enlightenment. And we would virtually be a tzaddik. We are what we are to the extent that we have the vessels to contain the light. We're born with the vessels capable of containing the nefesh, the lowest level, and as we mature through childhood, we gain a ruach, but the neshama does not necessarily come in. That comes in through one's endeavor, through working on oneself, doing mitzvot, learning Torah. And the Rizal says that when a person, human being, has not only a nefesh, ruach, neshama, but a chaya, which is also known as the neshama of the neshama, the soul of the soul, it's called the chaya, says that person is impervious to sin. It is impossible for such an individual to transgress. There is so much light emanating out of this person, they're literally in a higher dimension. What we see, their body in this world, has nothing more than their feet dangling into this lower dimension. How would you know if somebody had a chaya? You would know because you couldn't look at them. There'd be so much light, literally, beaming out, you would not be able to adjust your eyes. You would have to turn away. That's how you know if someone has a chaya. And we know that, in truth, the result tells us, only 2 and 3 humans ever had a chaya. And they were Adam and Enoch. And that's part of why Enoch could not continue to exist in this lower world, which we call flat land, which actually, as I've introduced, is a term is borrowed from a book called Flatland, written by Edwin Abbott a little over 100 years ago. He was a Shakespearean scholar and a schoolmaster and an educator, and he wrote this satirical book, but that's become a classic to this very day. It has not been outgrown at all. It's amazing. It is the first and the best introduction to higher dimensionality. It is an absolute requirement. Yes, Miriam Ben Yaakov asked the question, is this why Moshe's face glowed? Yes! Beautiful. And that's why no one could look at him. Now, let's appreciate this. Okay, we got this image. Moshe, who had to wear a mask over his face from the time he came down from Sinai for the rest of his life, because nobody could have a conversation with him unless his head was covered, because the light was just too great. Now this is the light that's beaming out of his head. This is after the fall of the Chet HaEgel, of the sin, the golden calf. What was the state of Moshe before the fall? His whole being, every cell was emanating with 1,000,000 watts of divine electricity. And that's not all, folks. Before the fall, the entire nation of Israel, that was out Mount Sinai, before, at the end of the 40 days, during that 40-day period, every single Hebrew, Israelite, Jew that was there was radiating the same light that was left only as a remnant coming out of the head of Moshe. And not only that, but every single Jew that was there, the 2 to 3 million Jews, not only was their beings radiating with pure divinity, every cell in the body, and there's many statements of Chazal that can be brought to substantiate this, that this is in fact what the sages are describing. This is our tradition. It's 3,300 years old, handed down from father to son, mother to daughter, teacher to student, that this is in fact what happened. But not only that, but all those single bodies that were emanating with the same light that was coming out of the head of Moshe, all those bodies merged, morphed, to use the modern term, into one single being, one single body. I wish I could share with you, the folks online, I shared it with my live class here. It's an advertisement I took out of a magazine, and you've probably seen this before. It's a technique that's been used. What it is, it's a human face, but when you look at it up closely, you see it's a composite. It's a photo montage. It's made out of hundreds and hundreds of individual pictures, individual items, including many faces of people, but all kinds of artifacts. And when you step away, it becomes one face, and when you zoom in, you see it's made out of, as it were, little faces. If you imagine that this was Mount Sinai, and all these hundreds and hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of individual pictures all coalesced, merged together, that now God is looking down, as it were, at Mount Sinai, quoting the words now from the prophet, who says, Atem Adam, you are Adam. And the Arizal asked the rhetorical kasha that it should state either you singular are Adam, or that you plural are people. It says Atem Adam, you plural, the word Atem, Adam the singular. So he explains that this is not saying this statement from the prophet, which is elaborated into a well-known Chazal statement of the sages in the Talmud. Yes, I do see the whiteboard. Yeah, thank you. Our whiteboard had disappeared. Let's see what I can pull up here. Let's see here. 5 levels here. Okay. Yes. Okay. We lost a little bit of the bottom here. This is what I showed you last week, just to give you an idea of the souls. This is what I call solo holoarchy. It's because don't think of a nefesh and a ruach as being two separate things, because the nefesh has a ruach aspect and the ruach has a nefesh aspect. This is called holographic. The term in Kabbalah is known as the interpenetration and interconnection of the worlds and dimensions. The concept of holography has not just been well known to the sages, the idea of a holographic universe, that's what we're living in, but it is impossible to truly understand the language of the sages and the language of the Torah that's not predicated upon the model that now in modern science is called holography. And incidentally, I always like to point out these little Jewish trivia. The inventor, the discoverer of holography was a man, Dennis Gabor, who received the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the principle and the concept of producing a hologram through holography. Dennis Gabor was a Jew. And you may know that name some of you older folks, our age, as in Ava and Jaja.
Yeah.
Sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah.
Well, yes, they were also Jewish. In any event, this is a concept that we refer to as solo holoarchy, the recognition that each level contains all the other levels. Now, getting back to our section here. So the problem was, okay, so, and who? One other person had a chaya, so that was Moses. The reason Moses is not, we answer that there are only two people that ever had a chaya. Why isn't Moshe included initially in that calculation? Because of the fall, he lost it. There was only a remnant that was remaining in him. You might say it was the nefesh of the chaya. You got that? You understand that? Look at the map. Look at our chart here. You see what a nefesh of the chaya would be? Okay? Now, and even when we say, we might as well teach this because it's very illuminating. When we say someone has, no pun intended. When we say someone has a nefesh and a ruach, well, it actually gets a little more specific than that. Because, well, you say, well, do you mean they have a nefesh of the nefesh, or a ruach of the nefesh, or a neshama of the nefesh, or for that matter, a chaya or a yechida of the nefesh? And when we say that we're born with a nefesh and a ruach, well, all that refers to is the nefesh and the ruach of the nefesh, and the nefesh and the ruach of the ruach. If somebody were to have a true neshama, they would also have a neshama of the nefesh and a neshama of the ruach. Because reality is holographic. You can't have anything separate by itself. It has to be where everything is containing an aspect of everything else. And so, only a very evolved individuals, only the tzaddikim, have a neshama, and even then, because of the status of the world today, we're all bound by our generation. We can't be more than what the generation is, and we also taught this. Every generation is an Adam Shalem, one complete Adam. It's called a Shiur Koma, a full stature, a complete structure, a Partsuf Shalem is the Kabbalistic terminology, a complete persona, fully integrated gestalt. Every generation has a head, feet, legs, torso, meaning leaders, schleppers, people in the middle, people on the right, people on the left. In any event, today, if someone just has a nefesh of a neshama, that's already charisma. You would be aware there's something electric about that individual. And if they had a ruach of a neshama and a neshama of a neshama, we'd already be worshiping that person as a god. I mean, lahavdil. But there would be so much compared to what we know of people around us, the amount of divinity emanating out of them, and their level of consciousness and enlightenment. In any event, simply put, Adam had a chaya. And not only that, that means he had the nefesh of the chaya, the ruach of the chaya, the neshama of the chaya, and the chaya of the chaya. How chaya can you go? I don't see anybody writing any ha-has. So, the question is, how could he have fallen? How could we be here today in this flatland reality. Oh, I was going to add parenthetically the term that we use, flatland, from Edwin Abbott's book, An Introduction to Dimensionality. It's a very small book. You can pick it up. You can always get a used copy for a couple bucks or less. I highly, highly recommend it. You don't even have to read the whole book. In fact, I have a synopsis of it in one of my books. If anyone's interested in, just contact me. And this term flatland, which I borrowed, and then I discovered that, in fact, it is the actual literal term that the sages have been using for thousands of years. When they refer to this world, there's many different names for Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, this world as opposed to the next world. Many different terms referring to different aspects. One of the terms the sages use is Olam HaShafel. A shafel is a plane, a P-L-A-I-N, but very nicely is a double entendre for P-L-A-N-E. Plane as two-dimensional, as in flat. The word Olam HaShafel is translated as this lower world, and that is a meaning of the word shafel, but it literally also means a flat plane is called a shafel. It's a geographical designation for a flat geographical topological area is called a shafel to this very day in modern Hebrew. Olam HaShafel literally is what? Flat world. And all these concepts are relative. Remember, if you lived in a two-dimensional reality, that would be your depth. That would be your life. And the idea of a third dimension would be inconceivable. And you'd say, what do you mean? There's more depth to this? There's more life than two dimensions? Well, guess what? Yes. And the same thing in ratio replicates itself. We've got our three dimensions here. Life is so full. I mean, there's so much going on here. Can there be more than this? Not possible. Well, there is. According to Torah, there is a fourth dimension here. It means a fourth direction. Can you move in a fourth direction? No. You can move vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. That's what we call depth. You try moving in a fourth direction. You can't do that. But the Torah says there is, in fact, we are embedded in it. That's the reason we're not aware of it. Without the Torah, we would not know that we have collapsed and fallen. This is what's known as the fall of Adam. The technical term, this is very illuminating also to study and always catch the Hebrew terms that the Torah or the sages are using. Because these terms, when you go back in and look at the root of where these terms that have become so common in English we take for granted. For example, we all know the word sin, right? There's a chait, which means there's a miscalculation. In this case with Adam, obviously a catastrophic miscalculation, but a miscalculation nonetheless. And the other term here is flatland. What was the other term I was going to explain? Oh, we call it always, the fall of Adam. Well, really, it's a collapse, not a fall. I mean, a fall is just like a two-dimensional representation. It's a collapse. It's a total collapse of higher dimensionality. Adam, see, with the term with fall, it sounds like you're on a mountain, okay? You fall down, you fell off the mountain. The top of the mountain where you fell is still there. And you fall down to the ground below. That's not what happened with Adam. When it says that Adam fell, all reality falls with him, because Adam was not separate from reality. His consciousness was reality. So it's more appropriate to use the term the Adamic collapse of higher dimensionality. You see the degree of sophistication this adds, and it helps us break from any of the Christian Western framework that these profound teachings and concepts have been trapped in for hundreds and thousands of years. And the term in the Kabbalah that's actually used is called Nefilat Hada'at, which means the falling, the collapse of the Da'at. The Da'at here is referring to specifically the middle brain, right brain, left brain, middle brain, and it is, of course, also referring to the mystery of the Eitz HaDa'at, the tree-like structure of Da'at, knowledge. Now, so here we are. The question is, how could this have happened? This is the kasha, the difficulty, that if Adam had a chaya, he was impervious to sin, how could he have done what he did? And not only that, we're going to add to the kasha, okay? This is a unique way of learning Kabbalah. We're learning Kabbalah from a Talmudic perspective. What does that mean? Talmudic thought, rabbinic thought, is all kasha teretz. Kasha teretz. Difficulty, resolution. New difficulty, new resolution. This is not just question and answers. Because every new kasha opens up, allows us to penetrate deeper, to increase the magnification. That's why we use the term resolution and not an answer. Because a resolution is a double entendre. It means an answer, but more than that, it just means we're increasing the resolution. You know what the greatest thing that you can find? The greatest thing you can have after you have a difficult problem, a kasha, that you've been working on for days, months, even years, decades, and you finally have the resolution. But you know what the greatest joy is? That as soon as you get that resolution, you see another problem. This is the authentic Jewish way. This is part of what it means to have a Yiddish cup, as opposed to a Goyish cup. It's a distinct, unique way of thinking that is indigenous to the collective mind of the nation of Israel. And here's the next kasha. Not only was Adam impervious to sin, but Adam before the collapse was on a higher level than Metatron is today. What is Metatron? Well, it's big. Very, very, very big. It appears, we mentioned last week in passing that Metatron, if you look it up in the dictionary, it'll tell you it's an angel, it'll tell you it's an archangel. Metatron is the name of the program that the divine mind uses to run the whole world. It's like the computer Big Blue. It's the name of the computer, it's the name of the program. And that's a whole study in and of itself, what this whole teaching, profound teaching of Metatron is about. But the lesson points out here that Adam before the fall was on a greater level than Metatron. Metatron, from our perspective here, look, you have some little inkling of, the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, right? Can you imagine meeting one of those? Can you imagine having one of those archangels come down? We would just be incinerated just with the awe and the light beyond comprehension. Metatron is Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael all together. When you use a little electrical light in your house, okay, you got a light on, that's an angel. That's one pulsation. When you go down to your box down below, or in your house, wherever it is, your circuit breaker, okay, that's a bigger angelic pulsation. You go out to the street, right, where all the houses come together in that trunk, okay, That's, you could say, that's the archangels. But when you follow that big trunk line all the way back to where? To the power plant. That's Metatron. That's the meta-archangel. That's the root and source of the pulsation, the electrical current, the divine current that's running everything. We don't have to know what it is, but rather just in ratio. We're trying to get a sense of relativity here. That whatever Metatron is now, which is big beyond our conception, Adam was bigger than that. Meaning more higher dimensional than Metatron, more godly than Metatron, more consciousness, more divinity, whatever you can say about Metatron. Adam, before the fall, was bigger than that. Now, if that's the case, you see how the kasha gets even more elaborate, more tantalizing. Not only how could Adam have sinned because he had a chaya, but he was bigger than the archangel, the meta-archangel Metatron. How could something like that have sinned? Something so ridiculous and stupid. I mean, who would be taken in by the guile of the serpent? Metatron. If you can't conceive of Metatron doing that, and that's what you have to try to conceive that you can't conceive of, all achat kama v'kama, the more so, how could you even go near conceiving that Adam could have sinned? Because Adam was totally godlike, beyond any comprehension. See, that's why you have to go in stages. If you just try to imagine what Adam is, you can't even begin. You got to start with something that that we already can't imagine, something like an angel. How many of you have seen an angel? Okay, a real one. Okay, now make that 10 times. Make that 100 times that. 1,000 times that. 10,000 times that. And that's 1,000,000 times that. That's Metatron. Adam is beyond that. Are we clear about what we can't get clear about? This is important. This is really, really crucial. One of the most important things about learning from a Kabbalistic perspective, the inner teachings of the Torah, about learning about Adam is to first know what it isn't. To know the limitations of our mind and our conceptualization before we begin to glimpse little fragments of conceptualization. Okay. And we're going to add to the difficulty. We're going to show you a chart next week. An actual map of the Garden of Eden. Yes. Yes. This is coming directly from the Leshem, from the Arizal. I've mapped it out into a graphic form. I will show you an actual schematic map of the Garden of Eden. And where was what? And what was what? And one of the immediate problems we're going to be confronted with is that the Garden of Eden, as we will see, there was a type of spiritual moat that surrounded it that nothing could cross. And any semblance of klipa means a husk, a shell, is the term used in the Kabbalah to refer to the spiritual roots of all evil. The Gan Eden was hermetically sealed. You ever think about that question? This is really our main one of the main questions in the exposition on the Tree of Knowledge is it was hermetically sealed. And imagine now the essence of evil is a type of virus, okay? And it's separated by this spiritual moat. There's no way it can get in. In other words, Adam's reality was so much higher than where we are now. There was a huge ravine. There was a ravine the size of the Grand Canyon that went all around the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, and it was hermetically sealed, and nothing could get in. Now there was some kind of cosmic virus that was on the other side there. We know this. This is the remnants of the primordial worlds, which we'll be referring to. This is the second verse in the Chumash when it says, "V'ha'aretz hayta tohu uvohu," that the land, the preceding reality, the preceding layer was chaos. Okay, that's referring to the primordial worlds, which we'll come back to. And that, from there, is where this remnant was of this virus. The question is then, how did it get into the garden? More specifically, who let it in? Remember, we're at the scene of a cosmic crime. We're detectives. We're Sherlock Holmes. And there's like a catastrophe took place here that's just unbelievable. And how did this happen? That's the question. How could it have happened? Adam was a godlike being with a chaya, impervious to sin. He was on a higher level than Metatron is today after the fall. And Gan Eden and Adam was separated by a spiritual moat hermetically sealed off from any evil. So how could all of this have happened? How can we be here in the world today with all this evil, all this death and famine and suffering and hatred? All this came about because of the fall of Adam. We have a right to know, how did this happen? How could it have happened? And in order to answer how could it have happened, we have to appreciate that it was impossible for it to happen.
Okay.
That's our starting point. This is how the Leshem is opening up his exposition, and it just gets better from here on. Now we answered in part the 1/3 of the question. How could he have sinned? Because he had all these parts of his soul, and anyone who has this is impervious to sin. Like Hanoch, once again. He lived 365 days, and then all of a sudden he was gone. Because the world was on a lower level. He wasn't. The world couldn't contain his chaya. That's why he went up. Like the same thing with Elijah the prophet. There's some important similarities and fractal connections there. He went up in a fire. His skin turned into flaming divinity. This is what's described. And of course, Enoch becomes part of what is called Metatron. That's a whole other story. All right. And the answer was, remember last week? What did we answer? Because it only works if you have a chaya and you're impervious to sin, if you build it yourself. If you build it, they will come. All these levels of your soul, and when they're built by you. See, Adam was given all this. He was just manifested with this. It did not come from the bottom up. It came from, as it were, the top down. He had not, in simple terms, he did not build it through his own blood, sweat, and tears. He did not build it through Torah, learning Torah, and mitzvot, which is the fuel of creation. And since he did not build it from the inside out, it had an inherent weakness, and it was that weakness then that, as we're going to see, became infected with the cosmic virus. And this is what the Leshem says. Hine kazehu rak mi shezacha la'asig et ha'neshama l'neshama ayidei ma'asav. This only applies to one who merits to grasp, contain the soul of the soul, the chaya, through one's actions. Because then all the levels come in from below, going up. And all of the birurim, all of the separation out of the holy sparks from the dross, from the waste material that we separated from, then Everything, you see, everything that you eat, everything that you do, that is part of your soul. That's why you're being drawn towards that, why you're put into any particular situation. You are redeeming the parts that are relevant specifically to your soul. And nobody else can touch those parts. Each one in this sense is on a mission. Each one of us is a micro atom that is on a mission, that we're, just like the divine says in the Torah, "B'yom achalacha mimenu mot tamot." And the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. That's not a curse. It's not like an authority figure is, all right, you broke the law, now you're going to get it. No. There, the Torah is describing the formula. If you cause all reality to collapse and go down into Olam HaShafel, into lower dimensionality, if you go from a four-dimensional, four-directional reality down into a third dimension, guess what? Who's going to clean up the mess? Not me, you. And that's each one of us. Each one of us is Adam. And we're on a mission to seek and redeem. And sometimes seek and destroy. And we will never be completed as our individual beings, whether it's this life or another life, until we pick up all of the sparks that are part of our soul. All of this is as explained in the Zohar, that it says when a person is born, he is given a nefesh. Otherwise, what's animating the baby? Okay, there's no consciousness yet. Consciousness goes together with the levels of the soul. Zacha yatir, when a person merits more, yahavin le rucha. Then a person receives a ruach, the next level. And when a person merits more through some natural growth processes, but through action, through working on oneself, perfection of oneself, and through doing mitzvot, then they give that person a neshama. Okay? And if a person even continues more so, in theory, a person then gets a chaya. That's the Zohar that says that. That whatever a person does, even to get the highest level, which we will all have in the future, it comes through actions. Because it's all about the stimulation from below. You have a principle throughout the Kabbalah, which is really the whole Torah is running on this principle. And it is Ein itaruta de la ela bli itaruta de la tata. Okay? Can you all pronounce that, please? Okay, that's Aramaic of the Zohar. It means there is no arousal above unless it's preceded by arousal from below. Nothing radiates from above unless it's stimulated from below. The rain doesn't come from heaven. Guess where the rain comes from? From the ground. It's the moisture in the ground that's heated up, and through evaporation it rises up and collects in clouds, and then it rains down. That's the principle. There's no arousal above unless it's preceded from below, and this is the same principle here. Even when we will even have the highest level, nothing's going to be just given to us. And you don't want that. Look what good did Adam. And the root of all of the Narnachai, which is the abbreviation for these 5 levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, and Yechida, it's called the Narnachai or Neiron Chai. Behold, they are all extractions from the holy sparks that are being constantly extracted and elevated from the time that they fell in the world of the Tohu, in the primordial world layer that precedes Genesis. Because the root of all realities, all the dimensions, and all the souls, and all existence, in its entirety, all of this is coming from the Nitzutze Kedusha Shemidbarim Mehasigim V'Haklifo. Everything is coming because it's being extracted out of the fractal sparks that are being separated out from the waste material, from the Klipot. Remember, where did this whole creation come from? Genesis. Every day is extraction is what's happening out of the prior layer. This is this simple pashat that order is being made out of chaos. Okay? This is replicating itself all throughout history. Every single day is Genesis. We are reformatting. It's a slow process. We are reformatting, reconfiguring reality by extracting out the fallen sparks from where they're trapped, embedded within, which was exactly what took place at Genesis. Each day of Genesis is an extraction of the light that had fallen and collapsed from the primordial worlds. V'hinei v'kol nitzot kedusha shemitbarer hinei mitbatel aklipa mikol v'kol kikol chiyuta v'kiyuma haya yedei nitzot se kedusha shehaya tevua ba v'achar shemitbarer nitzon mikedusha olim mimena. And when the extraction takes place, the klipa is dead. Once you crack open the nut, the shell has no more function. It's no longer needed. And once you extract something out, that's why we have so much waste material ecologically. That's the whole chain. Why does there have to be waste? In Gan Eden, there was not waste like we have today.
Because everything has klipa.
Because now everything has klipa. Exactly. V'imkein hari adam asher hu zochel lenor nechai le'ma'asav v'nim azbato mimenu kol chalki hara nugei olav v'ein lo yetza hara. Oh, therefore, when one extracts it, that is what is mivatel, nullifies the klipa, renders it powerless, useless, and it falls away. And therefore, if a person does this incrementally and builds one layer on the other, then he has no longer a yetzer hara. Literally, you see how it works? It's not magic. There's a mechanism here. He no longer has a evil inclination. He cannot do evil because there's no compulsion, because there's no more klipa, because he's extracted. To get up to that level means he has built it, and he's literally taken out every nugget of gold out of the dirt and the filth, and he has separated it out, and he has burnt it out, and sifted it, and purified it, so it gets to a point, it is absolute pure gold, with no sigim, which are no waste, refuge, no negativity. And thus, this is how a person will be batuach min hachet. Impossible for that person, such an individual, to commit a transgression, which was not the case of Adam Harishon, who was created, and he was given from the nefesh of Asiya to the yechida of Atzilut. He's now shifting to the term used for the dimensions. Remember, these souls, I explained to you last week, these 5 levels of the soul are the same 5 levels of the 5 universes. When you talk on a universal level, or the body of God, you talk, as it were, you use the terms for the dimensions. When you talk about an individual on the micro level, then you use the terms for the soul, but they're one and the same. Adam, we have these 4 worlds now: Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut. Adam filled up all of them. He stood. This is what it means when it says he stood from one end of creation to the other. It sounds like mythology. Sounds like legends. How ridiculous can you get that a man, a Homo sapien, stood from one creation? Because he wasn't a Homo sapien. He was a Homo spiritus. He's beyond anything we can conceptualize. He stood from the nefesh of Asiya to the yechida of Atzilut. You know what term we have for that today? God.
Never not.
That's what we would call God. And relative to where we are now, Adam is what and it sounds strange, but we're so primitive in our inability to conceptualize. We have to do it. You see how this logically works? You have to step it up and step it down to be able to get a glimpse of that which we cannot glimpse. but that's the way you do it. All right. We will stop here. Do you have any questions or complaints? Did you get all that, folks? Okay.
Sure, we wrote it all down.
We're gonna have a
Typed it in here real quick.
we're gonna have a quick quiz on it next week. All right. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you, God willing, next week for the continuation of our field trip to Gan Eden. Good night.